Hey readers, I'm Rachel from Never Enough Novels, and I cannot wait to talk about a few book recommendations from my all-time favorite romance trope, Friends to Lovers. I have 8 book recommendations to share with you today. Most are from contemporary romance because that's the genre I love to read the most, but I also have one historical romance. It's a Bridgerton book, and one young adult romance as well, because who doesn't love young love? So, before we get into it, I want to talk about why I love this genre so much. I know everyone loves the enemies to lovers trope because there's that spicy tension and there's such a fine line between love and hate. But let me tell you, the friends to lovers trope, the slow burn and spicy tension is still there. It just develops over time and makes it so much sweeter when it works out in the end. There are a few reasons why I love it so much. One is just that the possibilities are endless with the story. You could have childhood friends who've known each other their whole lives, but maybe one of them suddenly develops feelings, but they don't want to risk their friendship, so they never say anything until the last minute when they finally decide to reveal their feelings. There's just so much at risk there because they don't want to risk their friendship, though. Or you could have friends who've known each other their entire lives, both have been pining over each other for years, but they don't think the other one has any romantic feelings. So they never say anything until they finally reach the breaking point, and there's this will they or won't they go for it. Or you could have two people who just meet recently, and for some reason or another, they can't get romantically involved. So they're like, we'll just be friends for a while. But as we all know, that never happens. So they get to explore whether they can be more than friends or if they will lose this entire friendship over revealing their feelings. So the possibilities are just endless with the friends to lovers tropes. You never know which way the story is going to go. The other reason I love friends to lovers so much is that it's fun to root for a couple who you feel like are going to make it in the long run, because obviously these are real people, right? And you want them to continue on in this relationship even after the book ends. So with the friends to lovers, they have this great base to start off of. So it feels so real and like they're actually going to make it if they get together at the end. And the last reason I love Friends to Lovers so much is that, we often know that there's going to be a happy ever after with our romance novels, but there's so much more at stake with the Friends to Lovers trope. So let's see, if you're looking at enemies to lovers, if it doesn't work out at the end, well, they go back to hating each other, which they started with anyway. Or let's take the fake dating trope. Obviously, they started this for some mutually beneficial reason. So if at the end of the period of time they decide, well, we really don't like each other, they just go back to the way it was anyway. They got something out of it that they wanted and they can move on. Friends to lovers is completely different because not only are they risking losing a romantic relationship, but they could lose their best friend too. So it all feels like the stakes are just so high. And when that happy ever after comes, it's much sweeter. So now that we've established that I'm an obsessed fan of this romance trope, let's get into my book recommendations. I couldn't resist making this my first book recommendation. It is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. Obviously love the play on the book title there. So Abby is one of my go-to authors. I've read every single one of her books and absolutely love them all. So with this one, The Friend Zone, it's actually the first in a trilogy. So if you love these characters and their friends, you can keep reading for a while to really get involved in their lives. In this book, the main character is Kristen, and she is the definition of a strong female character. She knows what she wants, she goes after it, isn't afraid to say what she really means. But trigger warning here, she deals with infertility issues, so that has definitely colored her relationships in the past. As she's planning her best friend's wedding, she meets Josh, who is the best man. He's your pretty typical perfect guy, but he goes on and on about how much he wants to have kids. So Kristen knows that there's just no chance that they could be in a relationship. Plus, she has a boyfriend at the time, so they both just agree to stay friends for now. But after a tragic accident happens, Kristen has to realize whether she will allow Josh to love her the way that they truly both want. This book is made me an emotional wreck. I was so invested in the characters that by the end, I was literally sobbing on the couch with their ending. I'm pretty sure my husband walked in at one point, saw me crying over my book, and just walked away. It's just a heart-wrenching but emotionally fantastic book that I highly recommend. Next up, I have When Sparks Fly by Helena Hunting. This book features Avery, who is one of three sisters, and they work together to run an event house. And this added a really neat element to the book because you just got to understand what the behind the scenes are of running a massive event space, and got to see some really interesting events that they held at the time throughout the book. So Avery loves her job. She's kind of a workaholic and puts a lot of time and effort into this since it's a family-run business. And in her downtime, she spends the nights with her best friend, Declan, who is also her roommate. So in addition to the friends to lovers tropes, you've got the roommate aspect as well. So at some point, Declan lets Avery down, and Avery ends up in a tragic accident. So to make up to her, Declan decides to be her primary caretaker for the next few months while she basically cannot move around. So this leads to a lot of forced proximity between the two. And though they've always just stayed friends, there's no denying that feelings start to develop as they spend this much time together. There are some very intense scenes, as you try and get ready throughout the day, you've got to take a shower, get dressed, and that leads to some interesting situations between the two. So this truly had sparks flying, and it was a ton of fun to read. The characters also grew a lot, and they learned a lot about themselves, so it really felt like their relationship made sense, and they worked on themselves to ensure that it could be the best it could be. So this next book was picked by Book of the Month last summer as one of its 5 selections, and I felt like it really put Friends to Lovers on the map because of its popularity. And all these people were like, wow, Friends to Lovers, this is actually a fantastic romance trope. And I'm like, duh, I knew this all along. So anyway, that book is People Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. You'll see this on lots of Friends to Lovers book lists because, well, it truly is a fantastic book. Anyone who loves stories that jump back and forth in time will adore this one. So we meet Poppy and Alex, who have been friends for years. They bonded over a road trip in college, and they made a pact to always spend one vacation week a summer together. So that's really the biggest time their lives intertwine, and they actually spend time together in person is during the summer road trip. But when we meet them, something happened 2 years ago that threw a wrench in their entire friendship. So we get to know the couple through their current vacation, which is all sorts of awkward, and we don't really know why. But then the story flips back in time between their previous summer vacations. So we really get to know the couple in their current status and also how they became such good friends over the past years. This book is just a wonderful example of Friends to Lovers and shows how you can develop this fantastic base with two people but not add that romantic relationship until further down the line, and it gives you hope that it can still possibly work. And if you like my book recommendations so far, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, and that will make sure you see all my new videos as soon as they come out. So before I get to my next book, I just want to ask, has anyone else lost a book on their bookshelves? I swear I own a physical copy of this book, but I literally looked everywhere and cannot find it. So clearly it disappeared somewhere, which I don't know if that's saying I have too many books or not, but hopefully it hasn't happened to just me. Anyway, this book is My Favorite Half-Night Stand by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren is actually made up of 2 authors that work together as writing partners, and they come out with some of the best contemporary romance books that I've ever read. There are actually 3 of their books that fall into the Friends to Lovers trope, so they are queens of this genre and queens of this trope. And the first one I'm going to recommend is My Favorite Half-Night Stand. So this was actually the first Christina Lauren book I ever read, so it's got a soft spot in my heart for it, but it is a fantastic read. In My Favorite Half-Night Stand, Millie and her group of guy friends turn to online dating to all try and find dates before this big event at work. Right before the event, though, Millie hooks up with one of her guy friends and crosses this line that they never have before, but they both agree it was just a one-time thing, nothing further. So after the event and as they go through their online dating shenanigans, Millie realizes that she is just not getting the same quality candidates that the guys are. So she ends up creating a fake profile and doesn't tell anyone else about it. And over time, her fake persona ends up talking to one of her guy friends, which happens to be the one that she hooked up with earlier. They get to know each other virtually and, start to feel something more going on. So this has a lot of mistaken identities, hijinks, and ultimately that question of what's going to happen when I reveal who I really am. The next Christina Lauren book I want to recommend is Love and Other Words So I actually just read this a week ago, even though it came out years ago. So it's one of their backlist books, but it's so good that it deserves its own spot on this list. In Love and Other Words, we see childhood best friends at its finest. So Macy meets Elliot whenever her and her dad buy a summer house, and Elliot happens to be part of the family next door. So over the course of a couple of summers during high school, they spend time together, get to know each other. They both love reading. Elliot's very nerdy, so they bond over their love of words and reading. But they are young and still in high school, so they never really think about taking the next step and making this into a real relationship up until the last summer that they're together. So they get to enjoy a few months of absolute bliss with their person until something happens that sends it all crashing down. So as readers, we don't pick up the story until over a decade later when they haven't communicated in that long. So they have gone complete radio silence for over 10 years when all of a sudden Macy sees Elliot outside of one of her favorite coffee shops, and they pick things up trying to understand what happened and how they might be able to find a place in each other's lives again. Ultimately, it is such a fantastic example of the people that are meant to be in our lives and how they can find a way to stay there over time. And just for the record, the third Christina Lauren book that fits this friends to lovers trope is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. For my next book, make sure you get your AirPods out because this is wonderful on audio. I just listened to it for the first time a few weeks ago and absolutely fell in love with the male narrator. He has a really distinct voice, which actually sounds a lot like the host of The Twilight Zone, if any of you know who I'm talking about. But it is something I did not know I needed, and now I want more of. That book is The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This has a great friends to lovers trope of friends who have been lifelong acquaintances, who have known each other in and out, and they both have this burning passion for the other one, but just assume that the other individual doesn't think of them romantically. So we've got lots of harbored feelings that neither of them talk about that are just desperately waiting to get out. So our two main characters are Bree and Nathan. Bree owns a struggling ballet studio, while Nathan is the star quarterback of an NFL football team. So their lives look a little bit different, but they keep their friendship out of all of that and are truly there for each other and the best friends that you could hope for. So finally, Nathan gets tired of hiding his feelings, and he enlists his football buddies to help create a cheat sheet of how he can woo Bree and make sure that she has the same feelings for him that he has for her. I laughed out loud so many times during this book. His interactions with his football buddies and just Bree and Nathan's interactions together were phenomenal and so funny. So it's got wit, it's got passion, it's got some ridiculous shenanigans that guys come up with to try and be romantic. But ultimately just a super fun book, a great listen on audio, and one that I highly recommend from Sarah Adams. Okay, we're finally at our historical romance. It's one of the Bridgerton books. So if you've seen the Netflix show, hopefully you have because it's fantastic. You might be familiar with the Bridgertons. This is an enormous book series written by Julia Quinn, and in book 4 we finally get that friends to lovers trope. So book 4 is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and this story stars Penelope and Colin. So Colin is one of the Bridgerton brothers. He takes some time away because he's just tired of the gossip and drama of living in high society, decides to travel the world, and when he comes back, he notices that his friend Penelope is a little more than just a friend, possibly. But while he was gone, Penelope found out a secret of Colin's, and she's wondering if he's really the guy that she knew all along. So while Colin's figuring out his new feelings for Penelope, Penelope's trying to figure out if her years-long girl crush is actually someone that she wants to be with. So there's the usual Bridgerton wit and drama and high society all wrapped up in this Friends to Lovers book. It is a ton of fun and an absolutely great read. Honestly, do yourself a favor, read all of the Bridgerton books because they're all fantastic. But if you're looking specifically for Friends to Lovers, then Romancing Mr. Bridgerton number 4 is the one for you. And now for our young adult addition to this list. Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. Paris, check. Young love, check. Romantic kisses, check. This has everything you would want in a young adult romance. So Anna is ready for school. She lives in the US, but her dad unexpectedly sends her to boarding school in France, which is terrible for her because she's just trying to figure out if her crush actually likes her back when she's sent across the ocean. Well, thankfully, things change a little bit when she meets Etienne, who is one of the boys that attends her French boarding school. Now, Etienne has his own girlfriend. Anna is still interested in this guy from back home, so they just become best friends. Throughout the school year, though, there's a couple near misses. Their timing's never quite right until the end of the year when she finally will discover if she'll get that French love that she's been hoping for. Obviously, this has everything you expect in a young adult novel. It's sweet, it's cute, it's got Paris. What more could you want? Pick up Anna and the French Kiss if you're looking for that young adult friends to lovers trope. So that wraps up my list of my best friends to lovers book recommendations. I hope you found something you can add to your TBR list, and let me know in the comments if there's any books that I missed that you think we should read.